And now I think it's time to bring our keynote speaker up. But before I ask him to come up, I'll read out a little bit about his background. Mr. Tamuno Atekebo, as managing partner at Stream Sowers and Corn, leads the firm's corporate and commercial group, bringing well over 3 decades of expertise in corporate law, restructuring, insolvency, project finance, succession, estate planning, and regulatory compliance. His extensive work involves advising multinational corporations, financial institutions, and project promoters on multi-million-dollar financing opportunities and corporate restructuring plans, due diligence, and regulatory frameworks. This experience positions him as a strategic voice on safeguarding business continuity and long-term enterprise stability. Terminal has consistently supported clients, including individuals, on succession matters and in building resilient governance systems that protect assets and preserve institutional value. His insight into corporate governance and organizational continuity makes him suited to conversations on succession and generational wealth planning. So, Mr. Atekebo, please come speak to us. We're very interested in learning how Nigerian businesses can thrive in the long term, last and endure, like the Ford corporations we all hear about, and some of those large behemoths that we see in the Western world. How do we get there?
Thank you, Jubola.
Thank you, sir.
Which
is louder? I think this is probably... Try post, let's see.
Hello. It's okay. Oh, okay. Put it on.
It's on. It will show.
Okay. Thank you, Jubola, for the introduction. Good morning, all. And thank you, Chairperson, for introducing the topic. And I must thank the Nigerian South African Chamber of Commerce for giving us this opportunity. This is something that a lot of us don't easily talk about for different reasons: cultural, religious. I've had instances when you tell people, even just to take the statutory third-party insurance, they tell you it's a test of their faith. That why should I take insurance? Am I expecting something to happen? Something as basic as that, So it's something at Stream Sowers and Cone we're passionate about, because we've seen people build businesses, and at the end of the day, they forget that their dependents will still need those businesses after they pass on to survive in one form or the other, and they don't make any arrangements. And at the end of the day, you have a situation where you have disputes, fights, and succession matters can be very emotional, So thank you to the Chamber for giving us this opportunity. As the topic states, for me, it starts from the individual before you even talk about the business. One thing people don't understand is that if, for instance, you own 70–80% of a company, a particular business or enterprise, and in some cases, beneficially, they own 100%. It's very common in our system. One person literally owns 100%, directly and indirectly, of an enterprise. And you don't make specific arrangements. You have a situation if anything happens. And, no matter what our fate is, definitely one day we'll all go. That is just the reality. Even Methuselah left at some point, So when you take that into cognizance, it's important for your loved ones, for you to do something so that you don't have a situation. And I always give this story, in my earlier days in practice, what I personally experienced. A situation where a guy who works in an oil service company suddenly passes on. That guy wasn't up to 40. Passes on. Had 4 children, a wife, and it wasn't, I'm talking about the early 2000s. The guy was entitled, as at that time, tens of millions of naira as his terminal benefit. Of course, when he got married, he didn't do any changes, and his relations with the wife came. His colleagues said when they looked into the eyes of his brothers, they said, if we pay this money, these children will suffer. They started trying to convince them to set up a trust, appoint a corporate trustee. It's not their responsibility, but this was their colleague. While they were in the process of doing that, I attended a few meetings. While they were in the process of doing that, the lady passed on. It was very painful. The lady passed on, and thereafter I left the firm, so I don't know how they dealt with it. But you imagine what may happen to those children. So it's not enough that you have the resources. You could have the resources. The company could have the resources. But if you don't have a proper structure, you will have a situation where everything will fall to ruin. So it's something that is dear to all of us, I believe. I just want to deal with some misconceptions. Like I've said, the insurance story I was talking about, I believe all faiths in Nigeria support succession planning. And it's not a conversation for today. If you're not so sure, ask your pastor, ask your imam, talk to him. He will show you the relevant portions in the Bible and the Quran that support planning. Creation itself is succession planning, I can argue. So it's very important. So we shouldn't shy away from having that conversation with our family, with our advisors. And don't do it alone. In fact, even law firms these days do succession planning. And that's why you've had instances, some law firms are now being around for longer than it used to be. Legal practice has been in Nigeria for over 100 years. I doubt if there is any law firm that is 100 years like we have in the Western world. But law firms these days do it. So it's very important, Of course, I won't waste time talking about the laws. Even your Company and Allied Matters Act. Because for a company, your governance structure, whichever one you choose, for some regulated entities, you already have corporate governance codes that you can rely on. I wouldn't dwell so much on this. Of course, your estate is your property, whatever you have, both personal and real. Estate planning or succession planning, whatever methods, so effectively not just managing the wealth, protecting it and passing it to other generations. Why is it very important? Why is it very important? I think maybe I should go to the next slide. You would think this is not real. And at times people think, I don't have so much, so why should I this thing? You will be surprised that, that roadside kiosk you're running, for somebody, that is his future. If you've been able to use it to take care of your family, why don't you think that, your heirs shouldn't benefit from it. You will have all sorts of crises, fights, and they can be, messy. And it's not a question of whether they are siblings or not siblings. I've seen instances, where siblings, in fact, I've seen an instance where a lady was telling her younger sister that they are not of the same parents, the same father. She kept saying it, and the mother was telling her, why are you saying that? I'm the one. This was in an era when DNA wasn't common. I'm the one that gave birth to both of you. The lady insisted. The younger sister felt defamed, went to court. Her elder sister defended it. She lost at the High Court. She said she was going to appeal, the elder sister. So it's not a question of, in my family, we are not polygamous. It's when it happens, you will know that you're not truly monogamous. You will see people coming out from all sorts of holes, that you will be shocked. More so with DNA these days, So it's important, one, to guide against intestacy risk and disputes. One thing people tend to forget is that if you don't plan, government will plan for you. It's just that we are not using that provision of the law effectively in Nigeria. In fact, I think in recent time, in Lagos State tried to do that. There was a property along Ikorodu Road that was lying waste, belonging to a popular family that they wanted to take over. And there was a case of some publication from United Kingdom, list of, persons that have passed on that nobody has come along to make any claim to their estate, because what the law says, if nobody comes forward, automatically that asset, the government will hold it in trust until such a time that somebody comes forward. That's why I'm surprised when they passed that unclaimed dividend and dormant account, law act, this thing, under the Finance Act. I expected some states to oppose it because when it comes to succession administration of estate, it's not on the exclusive list. It's something that states have authority over. So why should those funds go to the federal government? If you have a dormant account, it's domiciled in a state. They can consign themselves with the FCT. So I don't know, maybe those who were passing the law didn't realize, and when you talk to them, they will say it does not matter, So it's very important. It also helps to reduce, apart from disputes, administrative delays. It also helps you to manage your assets. That is, some, like the chairperson mentioned, some businesses are very complex. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that inheritance is the same thing as succession. They are not the same. Succession is more all-encompassing. Inheritance is almost either directly statutory or under customary law or Islamic law. Direct provisions have been made one way or the other if you don't make your own provisions. But it's not the same thing with succession. As the chairperson mentioned, you have to be very intentional. Because if not, what you've toiled for so hard, there are some traditions that it's not even the spouse that will inherit. It could be his brother. A brother he may not have seen for the past 2 or 3 decades. They don't see eye to eye. And all of a sudden, because of intestacy, that brother suddenly comes up and says, by our customary law, I'm the one that is supposed to take over this business. What do you expect to happen? Perhaps somebody who has never managed 1 million in his life, suddenly it comes that by custom is the one who is supposed to inherit a business that runs into billions of naira just because somebody has not made any specific provisions. So it's very, very critical. And of course, for long-term financial security. Now, there are various tools that can be deployed. You have wills, you have trust. Trust is the talk of town now. Everybody talks about trust. Anybody you meet, he talks about trust. I said, which trust are you talking about? Is it trusting someone or the legal trust that we all know? Some of them, when you interrogate them, they don't understand what trust is all about. And they don't want to seek advice. And they believe this thing here can do all the magic. I will just get one precedent and I have a trust. It's not as easy as that. Of course, lifetime gifts, or what lawyers will call gift inter vivos, or living trust, which is also a trust, power of attorney. I'll just briefly, we must all have heard of wills, primarily is a person saying how his estate will be distributed when he passes on, how things that concern him will be done when he passes on. And it does not come into effect until the demise of the testator. That's why they say it's ambulatory. Of course, for trust, when it comes to trust, one of the key characteristics of a trust is that you have to transfer legal title. So it's easier when you're not talking about real estate, because for real estate, it could be quite expensive also. Because some people will say, I'm going for a trust because, I don't want to go through probate, But it's easier. As we go along, I will also talk about, situations where it's easier. It creates a legal relationship between the person creating the trust, which lawyers will call the settlor, and the trustee for the benefit of someone. It's very important. And the asset, you must be sure of what constitutes the trust. That's why they talk about the three certainties. You must define the asset that the trust will cover. Of course, for lifetime gifts or living trust, as some people will call it, it's a legal transfer of ownership of property made voluntarily in the person's lifetime, which is what people are doing increasingly these days. And of course, power of attorney, which has some limitations, depending on what it's good when you're trying to authorize somebody, delegate powers to somebody to do certain specific things, very specific. It's easier because naturally for most power of attorneys, they automatically terminate on the death of the donor, except it's for consideration and you've passed, interest, so it's not very common. And of course, which we'll talk about some length as we go along. In terms of succession, on the corporate side, some people, these days, family offices are becoming very common, They have what they call family constitution, so that you have clarity as to the succession line, how the business will be run, who is in charge. And by the way, I need to put it here, for women that are so crazy about first son. My first son. Everything is my first son. The beloved, the person in whom I trust. At times, it may be your first daughter that is better equipped to run the business. I've seen it happen. I've seen a man, he's still alive, gradually transit and pass on his business to his daughter. It took time for him to convince her she even gave him conditions. And she has done very well, expanded the business. So we shouldn't be fixated with, it has to be my first son. I've seen someone that passed on his business to his second son because he said his first son will kill the business and waste it. You don't have to be emotional. And at times, it may be a third party. Just put the structures in place. Because at the end of the day, what do you want? What do you want to achieve with the succession? Is to enable your dependents to take benefit of that your business, the profits of that business. So whoever runs the business, so long as the person is running it well, why, perhaps if Ganifa Emi didn't appoint a corporate trustee to run the Nigerian Law Publications Limited, we don't know what will have happened. And a lot of people questioned him when he did it, but he's still standing. For lawyers, I think I want to say that that is the most reliable source of law reporting in Nigeria. And they've even gone digital. It's the corporate trustees that did that. So it's very important. You have to what works for you. It could even be your shareholders' agreement. I just want to mention this. It's very important because some people say, if I do a will, at the end of the day, somebody will get up somewhere and still challenge it. As lawyers, what we advise, just include a no contest clause. Fine, it hasn't. There are limited, in fact, I can't recall any case. There are lawyers here, maybe they will help me, where it has been challenged. Yes, in other jurisdictions, it has been challenged. Because what it does, it helps keep everybody in check. Whether you're doing a trust or whatever you're doing, it's good to have some will where you include a no contest clause. And you tell someone, maybe he's going to get 10 million and he decides that 10 million is not enough for him. How can he get 10 million when his father has billions? You tell him that if you challenge it and you fail, you will not get anything. Or it's only 1,000 naira you will get. That has a way of resetting people's brain. And in other jurisdictions, unless you have very strong evidence, for instance, to show that the person's mental capacity was not in a mental state to write that will, or on the grounds of public policy, most times the courts will uphold it. So it's a way of organizing your affairs as to, reduce disputes and litigation. Like I tell people at times when when they are preparing their testamentary instruments, I said, be careful. Because at the end of the day, if you don't get it right, the consultants will feed up your estate. Your beneficiaries will not get anything. So it's very important. I've talked about living trust. Primarily people do it in order to avoid probate. When clients come to you and they say, why must I give the government 10%? I have so much. Yes, you have the option of not including all the assets in the, what do they call it, for purposes of probate. But I tell them, you're complaining about 10%. In some jurisdictions, it's 40%, it's 50%, because it's an inheritance, So it's very common these days, And of course, even in a will, you can have, a testamentary trust. Some people do that, primarily at times, in order to continue some project or legacy, some philanthropic, activity that they've been using, and also for their minors and dependents. Just want to show the differences between wills and trust. The most important one for those who want a certain level of privacy, they say, look, probate, once the will is this in red, it becomes a public document. I don't want my activities out there. So I would rather prefer a trust, And of course, for wills, it's testamentary, And the estate tax, which people are so particular about, for trust, it's when there is income that, it will be taxed, apart from the initial cost, which may include perfection, depending on what is the subject of the trust, and trust can run forever. In terms of succession, it's a very important tool, very, very important, because it enables you to apart from identifying the people that you will appoint as trustees, which you're sure have the competence and capacity to execute whatever is the object of the trust, it can run for a much, much longer period. I've talked about intestacy and the fact that if you don't make any arrangement, of course, it becomes part of the estate can vest in the state, as lawyers will tell you, it's very important. And of course, the order of priority when it comes to intestacy, like I said, yes, is the spouse first, then the children, parents, siblings, Why it's important, for some people. We've had a case where somebody died single, and as siblings, one of them particularly decided to apply for letters of administration, and another sibling said no. And this sibling, while the person was alive, this sibling, they don't see eye to eye. This thing. Ordinarily, the mother would have been the next person, but unfortunately, the mother wasn't strong enough. So it became an issue. As a compromise, they had to include that sibling. But they said if the deceased were alive, as to take the decision, that other sibling will never be part of it. Will never be part of it. So that is what happens. So as the chairperson said, inheritance is just specific. It just talks about transfer of assets and obligations. And that's it. So it's something that can be done within, in fact, these days when I prepare wills, we almost put a timeline. We put a timeline within which the executors will finish their work, and move on. It's this thing. So it's primarily a legal process, and the primary thing is who gets what, and that's it. It's not a good, it does not necessarily help you to protect your legacy, which is what you want to achieve. Succession is a much wider topic, because it focuses on who takes over and how, which is very important for businesses. She talked about royal exchange that has gone through different generations. Studies have shown that more than 50% of businesses, even 70%, don't last up to the second generation. And maybe about 15% or less than 20%, the third generation. I was somewhere recently and I traveled, and a confectionery shop. In fact, what you will call is pop-off they were making. And they said it's 105 years old. I said, how can you be selling pop-off and you say it's 105? They pointed, this is the father, this is the mother, this is the daughter. For generations, you do biscuit, you put label on it. It's still pop-off now. And it's over 100 years old. That is, it's gone through like 3 or 4 generations. But perhaps if it's here, by the 2nd or 3rd generation, my son has to go to Harvard or Oxford. There is nothing wrong, because I didn't ask. It's very likely that their daughter they showed to me may have a postgraduate qualification. And perhaps that's why the business has survived for generations, because they were more intentional. They are proud of what they are doing. They've kept expanding. I asked whether you have other branches. They said no. It's just this store I'm seeing. So you are very, very intentional. Continuity. That's what, that's the aim. So when it comes to succession, it goes beyond just estate planning. You have to be very, very intentional. You have to be very intentional. And like I said, if you need to bring in consultants, bring in consultants. And thank God, recently there are a lot of companies, consultants in that area. Apart from the big consultancy firms, there are law firms, there are trust firms, that provide services in those areas. You need to. Because they will help you, for instance, in terms of putting up the proper corporate governance structure. And a lot of people don't realize, I was talking to a client, she was saying, why, we are company secretaries, legal advisor, why should she pay us so much? I said, you don't know what you're doing. Because it's a small company, but they meet once every quarter. They have board committees. And I was amazed at the level of reports from those board committees. And she got some persons from outside to invest in that small business. I said, you don't realize the value of what you're doing. Look at the stock, capital market. Some of the businesses that their price share is high. That have, when you see, you say, for instance, this is the biggest financial institution in terms of assets and maybe customer deposits. The price share of that financial institution may not be as high as another financial institution that the market perceives as having a better corporate governance structure, that the market perceives as everything not revolving around one person. Check it. It's there. It shows over and over again. That's one of the importance, whether you're a small business, no matter how small you are, of having a proper corporate governance structure. And that helps you in terms of your succession planning. So for business owners, it's very important. You need to determine the succession of leadership, transfer of ownership, and align it with your estate planning. You can't do all the hard work on the corporate business side, and at the end of the day, you've not taken care of your personal affairs. Because like I explained when I started, perhaps beneficially you own 100% or 70 or 80%, which is very common in this our jurisdiction. Perhaps that's why the float on the capital market is that low, because it happens. So you do all that hard work. On the personal side, you've not taken care of affairs, and somebody wakes up and comes when you pass away that I own 70 or 80% of this company, and you must make me chairman, or you must make me MD for private companies, as they will have executive chairman, which is not, at times, good corporate governance practice for our jurisdiction. I'll talk briefly about terminal benefits, death benefits for businesses. Increasingly, we're having situations where companies are being dragged into personal succession matters because you have staff who, one way or the other, have not done the right thing, despite the continued prompting of the company. You know, as we all know, under the Pension Reform Act, every company, once you have 3 staff, which is a very small threshold, maybe perhaps that's why you have micro pension and insurance these days. You're supposed to take group life insurance for your staff. And every staff is ordinarily required to complete a beneficiary nomination form, nominating his beneficiaries. For a lot of people, what happens? When you start work, perhaps you're not married. So who are your beneficiaries? Typically, one of your parents and your immediate younger sister or brother. The person gets married, has children. Company keeps reminding him, you know, from time to time, update your beneficiary nomination form. He doesn't get around to doing that. And tomorrow, something happens. Maybe he changes the next of kin form. He changes the next of kin form, you know, and something happens. Then you have an issue. You know, you're inviting litigation when that happens. So it's very important. In fact, I was telling a colleague that perhaps we should advise businesses, companies, when it comes to this matter, that staff should give an undertaking that if you don't abide by the company's processes and there is litigation, the cost of that litigation, because the company is just a nominal party, the cost of that, you will indemnify, your estate will indemnify the company, you know, for that litigation. You're just a nominal party. These days, with the high increase in the price of energy, maybe that 5 million, 10 million, or whatever it is, or whatever it is, you will have paid to the lawyer. You will have used it to buy diesel for a month, you know. So it's something very important that businesses need to take note of. And briefly, I will talk about beneficiary and next of kin too. You know, people think that once they fill a form and they write next of kin, that is the end of the discussion. It's not true. Next of kin is just who should we contact in case we don't see you at work for 2 days or 3 days. Who should we call? That's basically what it is for. It's not your legal representative or personal representative, so to speak, or beneficiary under your group life insurance or whatever other benefits you get from the company. Yes, one person could be both. You know, there are cases where one person is both. And there are also cases where you didn't change it, and at the end of the day, you've created a situation that has led to litigation between, you know, a spouse and perhaps your dad. And that brings me to another issue, which generally I will advise for all of us. These days, when somebody comes to me and he talks about writing a will or this thing, among the questions, I've amended our questionnaire. Are your parents still alive? I asked that question, and I learned that from what is happening to Albert Wigwe's family. Because nobody makes provision for his or her parents in these testamentary instruments. Nobody does that. The expectation is that your parents will go first, and you will take care of them while you are alive. So you're not going to write in your will that give my father, so are you expecting you to pass on first before your dad? These days I tell people, make provision. Except you're terminally ill, you're not likely to make provision in your will or whatever for your parents, you know. So these days I tell people, if they are alive, make provision for them. Because anything could happen. And there will be issues, you know. Anyway, that's an aside. So, For businesses, apart from the group life insurance, perhaps they have other terminal benefits. Note that those benefits form part of the estate of the staff. And if he does not make specific provision, they could lead to dispute or some contention. So it's very important, you know. And that's why now, in my practice, I've even offered, look, call me, I will come and talk to your staff for free. The importance of making specific arrangements. I will come and talk to them because it's very important. We're increasingly, and it's not enough that you have the resources, you have your business doing so well. It's not enough. I've seen a situation where the man had so much, his businesses were doing so well, and he passes on. And they can't pay the children's school fees because they need to go through a process. And they couldn't agree on the 3 or 4 persons they will nominate to apply for letters of administration at the very least. First year, they were looking for money, scrambling for money to pay school fees, you know. So it's very, very, very important. So in conclusion, succession is not just transferring assets. It is intentional planning. For businesses, you need to identify the people you think that can listen. And what's his name? Alhaji Razak Okoya said something recently, and people were saying, why should he say that in public? He said he will hand over his businesses to his younger children. And he's been intentionally introducing them to his business. They go to the factory, takes them abroad to see how businesses are being run. That is being very, very intentional. That is being very, very intentional, you know. So it's very important, you know, and you need to combine the right tools. Don't just say, oh, I have a will, that is the end of it. No, that's personal. You need to also have plans on the corporate side for your businesses. Specific, and if you need to talk to consultants, talk to consultants. It's also very critical, very important, so that at the end of the day, you come up with a solution that ensures continuity of that your business. Don't leave it to yourself, because at times you say, consultants will charge me so much, why should I? At the end of the day, it's your beneficiaries and business that will suffer, and it is important to start early. Like I said, you know, one of the pillars for succession planning, especially on the corporate side, is adopting best corporate governance practices. It helps. It helps. It even, you know, the perception, no matter what you're doing, that it creates is that is a properly run business. And it's easier for investors to conduct due diligence. You're doing due diligence on a business. You ask for minutes of meeting, you can't find. You ask for this document. You go, where are the, what title do you have? They are telling you stories, you know. So it increases the valuation of your business. So you have to include it in your business structure at the very early stage and not wait until maybe, you know, I've had a situation where somebody comes to me and he tells me, oh, I want to prepare some documents. Let's just do it. When I'm traveling, when I come back, then we can take another look at it. Quite an unfortunate situation. He traveled and he didn't come back. He came back in this thing. He traveled and he came back as a corpse. It's like he had a premonition, you know. The way he was hurrying me, and not as if he was going for some medical listing. We have to sign something, put some things in place. He traveled and he didn't come back. So don't wait until you're in a critical state. Something from as early as possible. You need to start, planning. Talk to professionals. You have friends. Oh, they will know what I have. Which one do you prefer? For people to know what you have, or for your beneficiaries when you pass on to become destitute and not have anything? They can't pay school fees. So which one? Or for that your business that you've worked, you've slaved so hard for, to just crumble. Which one do you prefer? So I think it is very, very important. And one more thing I would say, please, don't use your succession plans or estate plans, whatever it is, to settle scores. Some people do that. I will show her. I will show him. Believe you me. Believe you me. The lawyers are there. That person you will show, in addition to the loved one that you want to pass on everything to, none of them will enjoy that business or estate. They will fight and fight and fight and fight. Nobody will have access to anything. And I will end on this note. For all of us, it's not only when you have so much money. I want to, before I start making plans, young, old, startup, everybody should take succession planning very seriously and put pen to paper. Thank you. That's right.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.